Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken, and welcome back to another video. I come to you today in the middle of a thunderstorm to talk to you about Omen. Omen is the newest damage champion in Paladins, and as you can see by the fact that my weapon is made of nacho cheese, I have the gold skin for Omen. I have played this guy to level 50, and I want to talk about my thoughts on Omen. I want to give you my thoughts about his balance, about his bugs, and also provide some tips for playing Omen because I have learned a thing or two on my journey to level 50. So let's get started by first just addressing a few bugs that still remain with Omen. Omen has had a lot of bugs fixed from his initial release. I actually played him mostly with those bugs, so I'm happy to see that they've been fixed so soon. But at the same time, I've barely gotten to play with him since those bugs were fixed. One major bug that got fixed was that his ultimate will actually probably have the damage phase end after the animation, whereas before, you would have the damage last for about 2 seconds after the animation is over. That's good. Also, his fall-off has been fixed, so if we go back here, you can see that if I channel into my rifle form, yeah, the fall-off actually has a proper gradient curve. We'll talk about that once we get to the balance, because that does actually have its own new issues now. But yeah, generally that has been fixed as well. There have also been a lot of cases fixed where you would grip somebody and you would no longer be able to use your abilities. Apparently some people report still having this bug with some niche interactions, and hopefully they'll be able to fix that later, but it seems like that bug has at least partially been fixed. And then one bug that I still run into, I actually ran into it a few days ago on stream, and I'll have the footage for you on screen. I ran into an issue where I just walked out of spawn and couldn't use anything, and I had my rifle just machine gun firing like crazy. And it wasn't actually doing any damage, it was purely client-side, but it seems like this bug happens when you try and use your ultimate while in spawn after placing a gourd, or placing a gourd after using your ultimate in spawn, something like that. It's very finicky. I think the way I even had it in that clip that I just showed you was that I accidentally might have pressed E in spawn or something, but I believe it's tied to your ultimate, which... it's a weird bug. That needs to be fixed as well, but otherwise it seems like he is mostly bug-free. Mostly bug-free. So that's very good to see. Now let's talk about the general design of this champion and the balance of this champion, because I actually am pleasantly surprised with Omen. I found it hard to get hyped for Omen when I first saw him revealed, because, you know, scary primary fire with a lot of damage. Also, another Abyss character, woo, and he doesn't even look that good. All of his skins suck, even the gold skin. The default skin is actually his best skin, in my opinion. Yeah, it's hard to get hyped for him visually, personally. Plus his voice pack, he has a very good voice actor. I would love an announcer pack of this voice actor, but it feels like the voice does not fit the character either, so there's that too. But the actual gameplay, I will admit, is actually pretty fun. I like that it seems like Omen is a bit closer. He's not perfect, but he's a bit closer to kind of the design of champions in years past, you know, going back a few years, to champions that have simpler kits, but have actually pretty good skill expression in those kits because their abilities can kind of combo and work together, and there's a lot going on. And so I do appreciate that a lot. He feels more to me like, I don't know, Maldamba and less like Lilith, if that kind of makes sense. In terms of, he doesn't have over-bloated abilities, he does still have some bloat, but he has, like, decent combos as well. Not a perfect analogy, and again, he's not, like, a perfect type of character from that time period, but it feels like they tried to make something a bit closer to that. And the reason why I say, oh yeah, he's got a simpler kit, but, you know, he does have some combo potential, is, well, his abilities, I mean, just straightforward, they're very easy to understand. Shotgun does damage, okay. This thing is just a damage circle, don't stand in it. It's just a basic dash, and then Void Grip, but then he throws it at the end. There's some extra bloat regarding his passive that makes these abilities different, but it's generally easy to understand. But then what you can do is you can summon this ultimate, which is literally just a large field that does a ton of damage, very easy to understand. And you can combo your abilities to throw people into it. Like you can grab and then dash underneath, and then bam, there you go, you throw them behind you. And there's just cool combo potential that I really like there. There's also reload cancels, which are very abundant, and I feel like that also plays into the whole idea of, you know, simple, but has some interesting gimmicks that make him A, a little bit more skillful, and B, you know, just fun. Because, like, check this out. I can shoot, reload, and then animation cancel my reload. And I actually reload faster because of that. It means that you don't necessarily need deft hands on this guy, even if you're good at actually canceling that animation. Because you can just reload, void grip, there we go, and then combo into this, well, bam, he's dead. So I really like that design. But of course we do need to talk about his balance, because, you know, fun design is one thing, but actually having a balanced character is another. His damage is insane, it's through the roof, but at the same time it's also really bad and inconsistent, and I'll explain why. First of all, the shotgun is crap. That is not a long distance at all. And look at how much damage I'm doing with just the shotgun alone. It's so inconsistent too, because sometimes they'll get 500, and sometimes it'll be like 200. And on someone who's skinnier, it's a lot harder to get consistent procs, and sometimes you see there I'm even dipping into the double digits at this range. If we just switch on over to, oh, I don't know, Barrick, who probably has the shortest range shotgun in the game previously, and then we just go to this same distance, right? This wall right here, and then shoot. 429, 431, 432, 410, 432. You can see how much more consistent that is. It is so much more consistent than Omen's. That is really good, and even if I go off to the side here a little bit on this Ying, you can see it's still very consistent. I'm still getting that damage number consistently. Should it work like that? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But Barrick, generally much more consistent than Omen. Yeah, he has fall-off, inhibiting his range, but the numbers are consistent every time. Let's go back over to Omen, and you can see... let's just go back to this build again, there we go. Yeah, test this out again. 250, 250, 500, 125, 190, 250, 190, aiming in the same spot. And if I go over to the side of this Fernando, I'm barely hitting him at all, but if I do, I'm not even clearing 200 damage there. I believe this is the only real shotgun in the game. I believe the reason Barrick, Buck, and Furia's works the way they do is because they're not actually shotguns. This seems like it's an actual shotgun, but that actually hurts it in the case of Paladins, because it thus makes it the only shotgun that actually kind of sucks and is very inconsistent. And so I'd like to see some consistency brought to this thing. The spread is ginormous, and yeah, I mean, just inconsistent damage is not fun for anybody, really, because you never know if you're going to take a sudden burst, or if you're going to be tickled by Omen as an enemy. And as Omen, I mean, do I even need to explain why this is bad to play with? It feels awful. So I'd like to see that consistency fixed. You would think that Umbral Lance solves this, and to an extent it does. But Umbral Lance also has its inconsistency, because you'll notice this actually shoots out the same amount of pellets, it just has a spread that's very tight. But because it's still a spread, it means that you can run into situations like this, where if you're like hitting Fernando in the shoulder right here, you can see I'm not doing the full damage all the time. So I'm still getting that spread, and I'm still getting that inconsistent damage. Umbral Lance does make it a lot more consistent. If you see I aim center mass, I'm still able to do full damage basically every time. But you're not always hitting center mass all the time, especially if someone's, you know, you're trying to chase someone behind a corner. Like if I just go behind the corner here, try and shoot this Victor, yeah, look at that. Some of the shots just barely register any damage at all. So this honestly should be fixed. It should be made more like Barrick's shotgun, Buck's shotgun, and less like what he currently has. And what I would suggest for this rifle mode in particular, not just the Umbral Lance talent, but just the rifle mode, because keep in mind, if you hold left click by default, you'll just wind down into this mode, is once you're in this mode, just make it like Atlas, right? Atlas, if we go on over to Atlas, we can see that his rifle thingy has a spread of a lot of bullets, if you just, you know, do the basic attack. But if we charge it up, it's not, you know, 8 different bullets. It's just one bullet. One single bullet every time. No spread. It's just a rifle shot at that point. Do that for Umbral Lance. And the rifle form in general. The rifle form should basically just work like Binary Star. I am 100% convinced it should be that way. Especially because, I mean, this guy's, you know, an echo character of Genos in the first place. So why not make this just one shot, Binary Star, bam, there you go. And while we're on the topic of Binary Star, we need to talk about this new falloff. When Omen was released, his falloff was bugged, so if you would go to basically this range right here with Fernando, you see he just turned orange, you would get instant 50% drop-off, which was bugged. That was not good. You shouldn't have instant drop-off like that. You should always have a gradient. So I was advocating for the gradient to be added, because, you know, again, it's a bug. It needed to be fixed. But now his range is way, way, way too long. They fixed the gradient, but apparently the intended range was magnitudes larger than what I was thinking. Check this out. So this is 500 damage, roughly. Actually, the fall-off... Okay, the fall-off starts a little bit while they're still in the red there. But then we back up, okay. 390, 369. Okay, so we're not even at 50% yet at this range. Might not seem that crazy right now with the default rifle, but you have to consider the fact that he has a card that makes his damage so much more effective. So if we go Umbral Lance with, let's just do more 3. This is the weaker version of the build. More 4 would give me even more damage, but with more 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, bam, and, well, that's a 6-shot at that range. And at that range, I mean, a 6-shot might be reasonable, but it's still pretty crazy. And if you hit headshots as well, I mean, this is just such consistent pressure and consistent damage. If we compare this to, like, Leon, you'll notice that it's actually really, really good. We don't want to use precision. Let's use alacrity here. Go back here and, I mean, yeah, look at how much more damage we were doing with Omen. We can even use combos with Leon. The only good ranged attack she has at that distance is her presence. So this is so much better than Leon, and they specifically referenced Leon when they were talking about Omen's fall-off curve, and it is very similar.
I'm killing it.
But more just means that Omen is like a billion times more effective than Leon at range. And in general, I mean, if we just compare him to a lot of damage champions, his poke is pretty absurd. So I think the fall-off should be made more serious. Here's more 4, by the way. Bam, bam, bam. At this range, I mean, it's almost a 4-shot. If she steps in the gourd, she dies. Hey, there we go, nice. And yeah, we can try and hit a headshot as well. There's one headshot and, ooh, 5-shot, barely. But this poke is just incredible. So I think his range should be nerfed. Still keep the gradient, obviously. The gradient is important, but I think it should be a little bit steeper. Omen has insane bursts with more at close range. I mean, look at this. 1, 2, 3, do the reload cancel, and if the gourd didn't kill her, my shot would. And if we hit a headshot, I mean, geez, that was a 2-tap on Victor with the help of the gourd. So, yeah, this burst is honestly insane, and I think if he is going to keep this burst, he should be heavily limited by range. I think range is a good way to keep this guy balanced if we still want to have a character who is capable of doing this. Because, yeah, this is very powerful. This is objectively some of the strongest damage you can possibly have in Paladins, especially with the reload cancel. You can crank out bullets like there's no tomorrow. I mean, the reload cancels on every ability, and if you hit a headshot, which is definitely easy to do, oh my gosh, man, I mean, look at this damage. We're comboing with the ammo card, too? Look at that. It's really, really good. And so I think he shouldn't be able to do that, you know, back here as well. And actually, funnily enough, the inconsistency that we were talking about earlier helps to kind of keep that balance, because you can see even at this range, the damage is pathetic because of that inconsistency with the spread. So if the spread gets fixed, right, and he's no longer having those weird cases where he does, like, you know, 156 damage at this range, then the fall-off 100% has to be nerfed. I guess if they keep the consistency, or the inconsistency, rather, I guess the fall-off might make a bit more sense, but I would just rather have the inconsistency fixed and then have weaker fall-off, so that he's more consistent across the board, and also balanced to be a close-quarters juggernaut. I mean, geez, look at that damage. That is just... it's monstrous, dude. As far as actually nerfing more, I'm not entirely sure that it's 100% necessary, considering the ammo, and again, if the range gets balanced, then I definitely wouldn't consider it needing a nerf. Because keep in mind, I played him mostly with the fall-off bug, so I was dealing with that bad range a lot, where, like, I would go to this distance, and all of a sudden my more is doing barely any damage at all. Now it's still doing basically full damage at this range. And, I mean, yeah, I felt really powerful in close quarters, but that range was something that made me feel like I was still playing a somewhat balanced character. So, I guess that's something I would like to reinforce, is that, yeah, the range would be the best way to limit this card. But yeah, I mean, if the range stays the way it does, I don't know what the right answer is for nerfing this. But anyways, that's mostly all my concerns about the balance. I feel like his Void Grip and his dash and all that is pretty reasonable. The dash has a trail to it, technically it does damage. I don't really notice the damage at all. I don't think the damage needs to be buffed on that or anything. It's honestly like, the trail is a bit excessive. If it didn't have damage, it would still be just a perfectly fine movement ability. I think the movement ability is just fine. We could also address the fact that Binary Void is kind of a sucky talent. It's still his second best talent because the first talent is god-awful. But the reason why this sucks a little bit more than I think it should is because if you check this out, right? I put 2 gourds down, the damage doesn't stack. If the damage stacked, it would be a lot better. but it doesn't stack. So currently, it doesn't really make sense to run, especially when you consider the fact that it increases the cooldown, even though it does give you 2 charges. So it can be good for building ultimate charge because it is a lot of free damage, but especially also when you consider the fact that his base shotgun is just so useless that you're basically forced to run Umbra Lance, it's just kind of a bad talent. I definitely think the base shotgun, again, needs some improvements, because, I mean, just look at this. I mean, I'm still technically in effective range, and, like, if we just shotgun only here, it's so pathetic. You need to get in so close. And even then, at that point, you're putting yourself in a lot of danger, and you're getting basically, well, I mean, it's Discovery Lex DPS, right? It's good DPS, but even when you step back a little bit, oh, there's one proc of 250, there's 2 procs of 250, there's a 3rd proc of 250. It's so unreliable, man, and I don't like that. The unreliability is this character's downfall, but he's still fun as long as you just play Umbra Lance, I guess. Anyways, that's about it for the balance, so next up I want to talk about a few gameplay tips for Omen, because there are some things that you can do to improve your Omen gameplay. Starting off with his talents and his loadouts, his best talent, 100% unequivocally, without a doubt, is Umbra Lance. The other 2 talents just are not good enough compared to Umbra Lance, because Umbra Lance provides you with just so much more consistency, and that's really what Omen is lacking. Binary Void has potential to be good, especially if they make it so that the voids stack, but because it has the default shotgun, it's still just not a very good option. And then Everyone Dies is basically useless. There's no real circumstance in which this talent is actually helpful, so I just wouldn't recommend running this talent at all. It is the first talent, so you are forced to play a game or 2 with it, but once you have access to one of the other 2 talents, just play those instead. And ultimately, if you want to play at a competitive, serious setting, Umbra Lance is the best talent, and you should play that basically all the time. As far as builds are concerned, I have mainly been using More 4 and More 3. I have 2 of these builds. They're basically the same build, but with the key difference being that one of them has more at level 3, and one of them has more at level 4. And I have 2 of these just because sometimes I prefer more at 4 or more at 3, just depending on, well, my mood, and sometimes the setting. Sometimes I feel like having just that little bit more ammo is helpful if I need more consistent damage, or if I'm up against somebody who I can't necessarily 3 or 4 shot, like a Buck, for example, who might take like 5 shots to take down, and I just want to have a little bit more ammo, especially in case I miss. But these 2 builds are basically the same. So we have more, again, at level 4 or level 3. Then we have the health card at level 5. The health card is good on basically any character you play, just period. So obviously it makes sense to run this on Omen. Then we have Everlasting Vision at level 3, which is a pretty good level 3 card. Probably his best range card, and it helps a lot when you're trying to use your ultimate because Gravity Vice pairs excellently with your ultimate, so definitely recommend using this card. We have Coming End at level 2, which, despite being just a level 2 card, is the second most important card in this build besides More. And the reason for this is that it basically gives you a second clip. So check this out. If I just go ahead and shoot once and then throw down the void, well, bam, I get a bunch of extra ammo back. I was actually a little bit slow to shoot there, so I didn't get as much as you potentially can. But the point is, this gives you a lot of extra ammo, especially if you're coming on the back of a reload, because you can reload cancel with this ability, just like you can every other ability. Which, by the way, the reload cancel happens at about a third of the way through your reload animation. So, yeah, it's a really fast reload cancel. It's very forgiving, very easy to pick up on. But yeah, let's just say we do 1, 2, 3, then reload, do the cancel, there we go. And now I get just a bunch of extra shots from this talent. The reason it's only at level 2 is because this card, well, the scaling doesn't really work that well with more at higher levels. Because you can see it scales not based on duration, but rather based on ammo. So with more at level 4, for example, I only have a maximum of 3 ammo. So having this card at level 5 or level 4 just doesn't make sense, because I'm regenerating more ammo than I can physically put into my clip. So level 3 is the highest you would want to have this at, but considering his fire rates, you really only need this at level 2, because you're only at most regenerating 2 ammo with this card. So, yeah, level 2 is just the perfect value for this card, and it's actually insanely valuable to have it at level 2. 100% recommend using this card. It's actually one of his best cards, because that extra ammo just makes such a huge difference. So, bam, throw that down, and just unload into Fernando. I mean, look at that, I almost killed him with all the extra ammo I just got from this card. It is so important, especially with more. One last thing to touch on before we move away from more is actually that level 5 and anything below level 3 do not make sense to run. Level 5 limits your ammo so much that you're actually just going to be reloading just so much more than even having this card at level 4. That one extra shot is basically 50% more ammo if you think about it, being the difference between 5 and 4. And the damage difference isn't really that noticeable. If we just put this at level 5, for example, you can see that I still actually need to 4-shot a lot of characters, especially when Haven comes into the picture. And that is the case with more 4 as well. But we get 3 extra ammo, and it also pairs better with, coming end at level 2 as well. So, yeah, level 5 just doesn't make sense. And then if you go down to level 2, well, at that point, you're basically cutting your ammo in half, but you are not getting that much extra damage for it. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it's still a 4-tap, but it's a much less forgiving 4-tap, because if they buy some Haven or if they get healed, you're much more likely to need an extra 5th shot, or even a 6th shot in some cases. And so the TTK buff just isn't worth it when you consider the lack of ammo, and this is also the case for level 1 as well. Level 1 really does not make sense. 3 and 4 are the sweet spots, if you ask me. And so level 4 is where I like to have it. Level 3 is really good as well. That's the perfect spot to have this card, in my opinion. As far as other builds are concerned, he does have a few other good cards, but ultimately there aren't too many great cards apart from the health card, the ammo card, and the void grip distance card, and also the dash distance card are pretty good as well. The ult card is pretty good. I have 2 builds for it. This one is more for just playing either without more at all, or maybe with binary void or something like that. And then I made another version of this build which has more in it at level 3, but the general gist of both builds is that we have ultimate charge at level 5. In this one I have more health, but then we also still have coming end as a filler, and we have everlasting vision at a high level. And actually in this build I probably could do this just to keep things consistent, but yeah. Very similar premise to the More build. We're basically just swapping More for ultimate charge. And then in the More version of this build, because I have so many versions, yeah, we take health down to a 2, put More at level 3, drop the other filler card, and then we just have coming end and everlasting vision. So all very similar builds. And the ult build can be pretty fun. He builds ult insanely quickly. Let's just throw this over here in the corner, and then, I mean, you can see, I mean, I'm literally going up 5% per shot. So that is really good. Throw this down, well, bam. I mean, we just build it so fast. This is without morale boost. And this gets even crazier if you have a Ray on your team, by the way. I really like pairing him with Ray, honestly, surprisingly. She's pretty good with him. But, yeah, this can work pretty well as well. And again, even though you might want to use this with Binary Void, I certainly have used it with Binary Void in the past, Umbra Lance is still just the best talent, period, no matter what build you're using. But let's take a look at some other cards. The other cards, I guess I might consider trying, maybe in some weird circumstances. Pure Aggression, don't use it. It's just, it doesn't scale high enough. It's a dumb card. Don't use it. Noxious Guard is actually decent with Binary Void, but the problem is Binary Void still doesn't have the greatest consistency because it does increase the cooldown. So once your first 2 voids are out, you're not going to have another void for a while. It's an okay card, don't get me wrong. But again, it's just kind of... this card, honestly, is just inhibited by the fact that Binary Void is just so much worse than Umbra Lance. Gloom is fine, it's a cooldown card, whatever. Engulfing Mire is probably his worst range card, just because I feel like you don't really need extra to play range. It can be helpful, and honestly, I wouldn't mind running it maybe at level 1 or level 2 as a filler, but I would not make this the mainstay of your build. As far as the Void Grip cards go, the only good one basically is the range card. Knockback is basically pointless. Yeah, it scales pretty high, but you're throwing them downwards. You're physically giving them a downward momentum. So it doesn't get as much value as you might think. And then base damage of Gravity Vice, it doesn't make sense to run this card because you're not using Gravity Vice for damage. And you can get so much more damage value out of other cards, namely more. But, I mean, even the cooldown of Deadly Domain will probably give you more damage in the long run because that does actually do decent damage. And then Dark Leech actually does scale pretty well. It scales pretty high in terms of the amount of healing you get, and it's honestly a pretty solid healing card, but the thing is, healing falls off late game. So, late game, especially if you're getting shot at, which you likely are if you're trying to Void Grip somebody, you're going to get basically 0 value out of this card. That's why I prefer the health card, and a lot of other people prefer the health card too in most circumstances for champions, just in general, is because this will just give you so much more protection, even in late game, than having this extra sustain. So that's kind of why I don't necessarily like this card, but it's definitely not his worst card. Dusk Trail has good healing scaling, but it's totally pointless, because nobody stands in the Dark Stride trail, and even if they do take a little bit of damage from the trail, it's not going to be that much, and that's not going to translate into good healing. So this card, don't use it, totally pointless. I Am Everywhere is okay, movement speed after Dark Stride. It scales higher than the movement speed after Elim, and it helps you if you haven't gotten an Elim, so this one's better than this card. Lightless, just like Dusk Trail, totally pointless, because again, nobody stands inside of the Dark Stride, so like, why would you increase the duration of it? You're just throwing loadout points away with this card. Shaded Speed is pretty decent, though. Increased travel distance of Dark Stride, it's okay. And I generally tend to have this one as a filler. That's my preference. You could possibly swap this out as a filler for, like, range or cooldown if you really wanted to, but it's a decent card. So those are kind of my explanations of his cards. Next up, let's talk about some gameplay tips. Let me go back to my more 4 build here for a sec. So, the most consistent way to use his ultimate is not to just throw it on top of them like this. Obviously, it's going to wreck these guys because they're stationary bots. But if those were real players, what's going to happen is they're going to see that you cast this ultimate on top of them, they're going to walk it back, right? They're going to run backwards. And if they run backwards, right, let's just say this Ying ran backwards, so my ultimate is here, she ran backwards. I can't pick her up and throw her into my ultimate. I just throw her even farther away from the ultimate. That's no good. So, I mean, maybe what I could do then is I could cast it, and then I could try and grip and then dash, and if it works, that's the key word, if, because that's not super consistent. Because sometimes you'll still be too far away, so you'll actually throw them that way. If it works, you will just throw yourself into a terrible position a lot of the times. Because, think about it, let's just say this Fernando was on point, right? And then he walked backwards, and then I tried to throw him into my ult by dashing at him. Well, now I've just thrust myself into the enemy team's backline without a movement ability to run away. That's not a good plan. So instead, what you want to do with the ultimate, this is the most consistent way I found to use it without having any intervention from your own team. Let me just quickly kill these guys real quick. That should kill them, right? Yeah, there we go. The most consistent way to do this is actually to put it behind them, by a significant distance as well, right? Throw this behind the Ying, and then what I force her to do is, well, A, I can just Void Grip her and throw her into it. And that is actually pretty easy to do. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, right, she's not going to be able to back up. She's kind of between a rock and a hard place now, because she's got this big laser beam of death behind her, and in front of her, you've got Omen, advancing forward, blasting her with crazy damage. So she's kind of stuck. She doesn't really have a good place to go. Obviously, she can go sideways or whatever, but you're limiting her options to escape, and you're making it hard for her to survive. So it's generally the most consistent way to do that. And it is also pretty easy for your teammates to combo with that as well. Like, you can imagine, right? I throw it behind them, I throw Ying into it, and then Saris also decides to ult and just grabs the other two and throws them into it. So it's not like you're making it impossible for your teammates to combo with that either. The one instance where I guess it might be a little bit difficult is if you're, like, trying to combo with Makoa. But, I mean, that I haven't seen Makoa be super successful with this. I don't know if it's just because of a lack of coordination or what, but I'd say that's kind of an edge case. The other way you can get value out of your ultimate is just zoning the ultimate, or zoning the objective with it, obviously. If you need to capture the objective, throwing it on the point is just a good way to cause some chaos. You're less likely to get kills with it because people will try and play around it, but you are going to stall out the point fight. So it is still helpful for that. At that point, it's a zoning ult, right? Another funny thing that you can do in some circumstances is, let's say you're being chased around a corner. Well, throw that down, the enemy comes behind the corner, you can grip them to actually lock them into it before you throw them away, and if you don't kill them with it, you're going to at least maim them. So that's another way you can use the ultimate as well. There's a lot of strategy involved with the ultimate, and I really appreciate that. This kind of harkens back to what I was talking about earlier when I was saying he's a simpler character, but that enables him to actually have some cool combos and cool skillful gameplay. The ultimate is just... it's pretty straightforward. It's a very large beam of death. That's all it is. But the skill comes from deciding where you want to place it, when you want to place it, and making sure you position yourself and the enemies so that you can try and throw them into it accordingly. I really like that, honestly. Lastly, I want to talk about a burst combo that was actually discovered by Erlenmeyer, who is a mod on my channel, and he basically discovered something that's kind of niche, but it's a really powerful close quarters burst. I'll go ahead and put the footage that he got on the screen. I'm not the best at executing this combo, but you can see how fast he's able to kill somebody. And the way it basically works is you will shoot, or you will throw down your gourd. Then you will shoot, Void Grip, and dash into the Void Grip, canceling the Void Grip, and then just burst them to death. And it's something you can do in very close quarters to kind of disorient somebody, and again, the damage is absolutely wicked. He actually does it with the regular shotgun. He was attempting to find a combo with everyone dies. And so we can kind of do it like this. Like that, and they just die super, super fast. It's an investment of basically all your abilities. The gourd, I guess, would be somewhat optional. But it can be pretty nuts. And the extra damage from everyone dies does actually help it out a little bit. So again, we can shoot, and they die very, very fast. Of course, you can also just shoot them regularly, but if you really want to be impressive and make the enemy go, what the heck just happened? And just feel cool. In some niche circumstances, when you're close to somebody, you can do that. But of course, the problem lies when you try and do it from more of a distance. You can't dash to cancel the Void Grip anymore, because you're basically knocking them out of your own Void Grip, but if you're too far away, you can't execute it. Just thought I'd show that combo because it is something pretty cool, and it might have some practicality, but it doesn't seem like it's a super mainstream tech you'd want to be doing all the time. But when it works, I mean, it's pretty flashy. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload from me. Check out the Twitch channel. We are so close to 20,000 followers. In fact, it probably already says 20,000 for you because it rounds up, but we're still just a few followers away, so please go on over and follow on Twitch. Check out the VODs channel as well, link is in the description, and if you want to buy crystals, check out my Nexus at nexus.gg/AndrewChicken. There you can buy crystals, the season pass, and more, and support me in the process. I just kind of automatically said that, didn't I? There's no season pass anymore. My brain... Okay, I have some of these phrases just like pre-programmed into my brain because I've said them so many times. I haven't done the Nexus shoutout in a while. Most of the time I said to do that for the Season Pass, but that's not a thing anymore. Oh my god. Okay, you can't buy the Season Pass on Nexus. But you can buy other DLC. Oh, wow, my brain just broke there for a second. I am sorry. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.